Hello and welcome to episode 7 of season 5 of the Inner Success Story podcast. I am going to talk to you today about where it began for me. And I suspect, and certainly in my experience, this is where it began for a lot of people. So this season, we're focusing on toxic relationships, and today we're going to talk about parents. So, my experience, my lived experience is that my toxic relationship story started in childhood with my parents. It didn't start when I started having adult relationships. It was already in play by that point. And with my parents, with my clients, I quite often find that it's exactly the same. So today, I just want to talk you through the fact that mostly this is to do with your childhood story, as opposed to the fact that you got to adult relationships and suddenly started attracting men particularly, but obviously depends on your sexuality and your preferences, and you end up attracting the wrong kind of partner. And that's because the story is already instilled in you that you are not good enough. So let's say, for example, you score yourself as a 6 out of 10. You are going to go for people who are 6 or less. Whatever your partner is, you're going to go for what you think of yourself minus a bit or the same. You're certainly not going to go for somebody who is significantly in your scoring system higher than you, because you would then feel intimidated. You would then feel like they might cheat on you. You'd feel insecure. So you go for that. But if you've got the wrong score about yourself in the first place, you'll end up with somebody who is going to take you down. Sometimes that's intentional, sometimes it's not, but that's what happens. And you will attract people who are not emotionally ready for a relationship to the extent and depth that you might want one. And then as you start to grow your self-worth and your self-esteem, you realize that you then have this big gap between the person that you chose and the score that you were at the time, and potentially how you feel now. So let's talk about where it all started. So for me, when I was little, I had a really nice childhood. My parents and me were like this little group together. I didn't have any other siblings, although unbeknownst to me, my parents were trying for a long time but weren't successful in having another child. So it was lovely. I spent time with both my parents. We didn't have much money. I remember being really aware of that quite young, but it was fun. My mum made everything fun. We couldn't always afford to get the bus, and we would walk, and my mum would make the walks really fun. We'd look out for stuff or play silly games and what have you to make the time go quicker. And my dad worked hard, but at the weekend, I remember him being very present. And, he would look after me when then my mum went back to work. He would look after me. She worked nights. He'd look after me during the evening. It was really lovely. If they had parties, I got to come and say hello to everybody before I went to bed, or sometimes I would sneak out and sit on the stairs and watch them for a little bit longer. All very, very happy, good memories. But when we moved house to Sussex, from Derbyshire, which was a really, really long distance away, we ended up moving during a period of time where there were lots of problems. So my mum was having health issues. I didn't know anything about it. All I knew is that my behaviour from my parents towards me became very different. I was a bit of an inconvenience. I was problematic. I was difficult. All of these things, and as a child, I was incredibly confused. As I've got older, I've started to understand and appreciate why some of those things happen, and I have a lot of compassion. But as a child, without that understanding, without that information, I was making decisions based on the behaviour that I was receiving. So when we're young, we are programmed to feel that adults, particularly our parents, are right. They know what they're doing. They're not getting it wrong. We look up to them. And that is a survival instinct. So we have to respect our elders and respect that they keep us safe, because that keeps us more safe, if that makes sense. So, if you go back to tribal times, we looked up to adults who knew the dangers, who knew the things that we needed to be kept safe from. That's where fairy stories come from. They are cautionary tales to not go into the woods and not go off the path and, not speak to strangers and all of these sorts of things. And the consequences for doing so, which obviously are quite significant when you consider that one of them is being eaten by a wolf. So we have programming to look up to adults, but not all adults do a great job. So before, we used to have a village. That's where the saying comes from, that you need a village to raise a child. We had a village, we had a tribe, and if our parents were getting it wrong, then there would be other people who would be able to step in. But as time has gone on, we've become more insular, we've become more isolated within our own homes, and therefore we don't necessarily know what's going on behind closed doors, and that's where sometimes it falls down. So I don't think my parents intended to treat me badly. I don't think they intended to become toxic, but they did. So my mum was going through this set of health problems. My dad doesn't cope very well with that kind of thing, and sort of felt if he ignored it, it might go away. My mum became very angry, very resentful, very bitter. And I was her emotional punch bag. She never actually hit me, but actually the damage that can be done with words, with actions, with behaviours is just as bad, and sometimes, if not worse, than physical problems. So I believe that we all go through some sort of rite of passage. And the rite of passage that I believe we go through is, at some point, we realise that our parents didn't get it right, that our parents are not infallible, that they do get things wrong, that they are just going through this for the first time themselves and are just winging it, as we all are. The older I get, the more I realise I don't know. If I would go back to when I was like 18 to 22, I thought I knew everything. Now I'm 48, I feel like I know very little. And they are just trying to understand how to parent for the first time. So all of these new situations are new to them. Don't get me wrong, the caveat is some people know that they're doing the wrong thing. Some people choose the wrong pathway. Some people choose to abuse their children. Some people choose to neglect their children. So it's not one size fits all. But I do think there are a lot of parents out there who tried and maybe didn't do a great job. But that then leaves us still with the problem, doesn't it? The problem of not feeling good enough, the problem of not being like, if we're not good enough for our parents to love, then who the hell else is going to love us? So you continue this parent-child situation into adulthood. And actually, there's some really interesting research and studies around what happens when adult children return to their childhood home for Christmas, for example, or for any celebration. We have that muscle memory. And they did a study of people who returned to their childhood home, but they did also, alongside that, a study of children, adult people now, who returned to their parents for Christmas, but their parents had already moved to a different house. So it wasn't their childhood home. And they looked at the differences between that. And if you are returning to your childhood home, the muscle memory kicks in significantly more. And you do kind of go back to some of those feelings and thoughts that you had when you were younger. So one of my mum's unfailing qualities that she has is honesty. Now, I always think that when you decide that you're going to have a rule, you also have to what it doesn't look like. So my mum prides herself on being honest. I consider it to be brutal. So my mum isn't just honest with kindness. She doesn't look at whether the honesty is going to be problematic or received poorly or even hurtful to the other person. She has this great need to be honest. I don't agree with it. I don't think that being honest is always the best policy, particularly if you're going to hurt somebody. But she felt that she was being truthful, that she was helping, and she doesn't have a filter. So she'll say exactly what she thinks all the time. And that obviously is problematic. So if you think back to your childhood story, and you think about the relationship between your parents, and the relationship with your parents, and then any siblings and whoever else was living in your house. It might even be that grandparents were involved because either they lived with you or they took care of you and what have you. So looking at from the outside in now, looking at that story, you will start to recognize elements because your default programming wants you to go back to exactly that position. Your default programming doesn't care whether your childhood was comfortable or uncomfortable. It is still your default programming. So even if you hated your childhood, you will default back to that by nature until you do the work, until you start to recognize the traits that you don't want anymore. Then you can up level to beyond that. But your story, if you've been in toxic relationships as an adult, your story is likely to have started in your childhood with not feeling good enough. It could be that there was a sibling who was the golden child and it wasn't you. It could be the challenging relationship between your parents. It could be that your parents separated and there were different households. And obviously I speak to a lot of people where one parent wasn't present, not always the dad, sometimes mum. And all of those feed into not feeling good enough. Once you understand your childhood story, you can understand the patterns that then happen that create these toxic relationships as you get older. Once you understand those patterns and you can see them copying across, you can start to make decisions about how you want to take it forward. I'm making that sound very simple. The process itself is simple. The consistency of doing it, recognizing it, and pattern interrupting it is more challenging because you've got to do it over and over and over and over and over and over again. So it's a little bit like, oh, I'm doing that thing. That comes back to this thing. I don't want to do that thing anymore. This is what I would prefer instead. Preferred behavior. But not doing that once, doing that many, many, many times until your brain goes, oh, we don't want this bit. We want this bit. So we're going to do this bit now. And it rewires and reprograms your thinking. A very, very simplistic way of putting a lot of different therapies that are available to help people to move through these. So in terms of toxic relationships, it probably started with your parents. Start to understand your childhood a bit more, and you will start to understand your patterns now. And you will be able to make choices about how you break through those patterns because you are worth everything. You are your most important asset in both your body, your mind, your soul, all of those things. You deserve the best. But in order to break that cycle, you have to stop dating. You have to do the work. If you don't want to change, that is absolutely fine. And there is no shade. Changing is hard work. I didn't change for a really, really long time because it was hard work. But I found my motivation in my child, in my son, and that has been what has changed things for me. But if you're not ready, it's okay that you're not ready. And I don't want you to be harsh on yourself because you're not. At some point, you may well be, and you will pick all of this stuff up then. But if you want to understand how you behave as an adult, then look at what happened in your childhood, what happened in the relationship with and between your parents, and you'll start to see the links. Let me know how this has landed for you. You can respond to me by email. You can leave a message if you're listening to this on Spotify. You can leave a comment, whatever you want to do. It's absolutely fine. You will also find, if you're listening on the on Spotify, once this has been edited, you will find a link in the show notes and you'll be able to message me from that. I will be bringing out a new program soon, which I'm super excited about. I'm not going to say too much more about it at the moment, but do hope that you'll be interested in coming and joining me. I will see you next time for another episode. Take care.